Thanks, everybody. Let's kick off the panel. Similar to what Simon was saying this morning in his keynote, sometimes you need the mental acuity and the resourcefulness and the ability to not get swept up by the minutiae, the change, all of these things that kind of happen to us, which means that we're not particularly resilient and we struggle for those things. And one of the best ways to combat that is the kind of Stoic principles that we're going to talk about now. So as much as business is about numbers and products and processes, it's also about mindset and your ability to be calm when you're under pressure, to be agile, and to let some of the most difficult things wash over you at times. So our fantastic panel today, first off, we've got Sam Kendall from the Digital Economy Council of Australia, heavily into blockchain. He wears a number of hats. We're going to talk to him in a second. Mary Jensen from Empower, Tim Adlin, is a philosopher, and Neville Christie from Steep Renaissance. So I'm going to start off with, first on the next to me, Mary, tell me a little bit about Empower Executive and what you do.
So I'm the founder of Empower Services, and why did I start Empower Services? I was at the top of corporate in finance, in predominantly manufacturing, so some huge globals, Robert Bosch, PPG Industries, Kina Metal, and I ran around in that field for about 30 years, headhunted for my work in mergers and acquisitions. And I got tasked with melding teams together, and I was like, oh, shit. I don't have the skill set to do that, but I've always been a gap identifier. So I knew I had the gap, retrained in human behaviour, so I've become a human behaviour expert and a mindset master, and I started Empower Services. We're a team of executive coaches, and we help you change your mind, change your thinking. We help turn problems into opportunities, challenges into solutions. We help turn stress into calm, which is a huge thing in business today, where a lot of us run around stressed all the time. And I loved that video at the start about stopping, because I remember when I was retraining and actually learning to stop, I was in that transition and we were at our holiday house and my husband said, "What are you thinking?" And I said, "I'm thinking, am I doing nothing or am I relaxing?" He goes, "What's the difference?" And I said, "Well, I'm allowed to allocate time to relax, but if I'm doing nothing, I'm inefficient." So sometimes we need to learn how to relax.
Thank you, Mary. Next, we've got Neville Christie. If you were at the Forge session last night over in Footscray, you heard a little bit about Neville, but for those who don't know, Neville, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks. When I was aged 12 and I started my first 3 micro businesses, the world was very different. Melbourne had no skyscrapers whatsoever. There were no jet planes. There was no television, no mobile phones, no internet. No AI. All of these things have developed over the last 71 years that I've been in business. And I actually believe, and I'm sure, that at this period right now, we are going through one of the most significant and wonderful and terrifying transformations that certainly has been in my lifetime. And as a result of that, 6 years ago, I set up a business called Sharing, where we did an ICO and we built our own blockchain. And that's all about the sharing economy, which is part of the new transition. Now I'm totally and utterly committed to AI as one of the most transformational tools. And as a result, I've closed down all my other businesses to concentrate on only one, focus on that, Steep Renaissance, being social, technological, ecological, economic and political transformation. So I'm in the transformation business, and I've never seen so many business opportunities in my whole 71 years to date as there are now.
83 years young and still as excited about business as ever. Next up, we've got Tim Adlin. Tim, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a philosopher. Yeah, and what that has meant for me has been a way to express that I like to slow down, think about the world, have conversations with reality understand what's going on, and that's a work in progress. I care about communication, about what it is to show up to that process, about what it is to drop into more of the intelligence that we are, and to share that with each other, and to build on that with each other. Philosophy, as many of you might know, comes from words which mean the love of wisdom. What is wisdom is an interesting question. We all know love to be important to us in life, maybe what it's all about. So caring a lot about what it means to understand reality, make choices in it. Who are we? What are we doing? These sorts of things. And so for a number of years, I've been bringing people together to relate with reality, to ask meaningful questions, and to be together in responding to them. And I work with people individually and with small groups, run an online network and media platform, different things. That's a little bit about me. Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. And then the other end of the spectrum, compared to Neville, we've got Sam Kendall, who's Digital Economy Council of Australia, wears multiple hats. So introduce yourself, please. Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Sam. As you said, I wear a couple different hats. I am an accountant by day. So in the room just before, I think I was the only one in the room. So that's good. If you need an accountant, let me know. I'm also fortunate enough to be a director of the Digital Economy Council of Australia. We are a 4 members non-for-profit that consults with government and regulators for the blockchain and digital asset industry. I'm also a uni student still. I should finish next year, hopefully. And I study accounting and blockchain. So yeah, look, I'm happy to chat about blockchain. I don't want to overshare anything, but yeah, I'm hoping we can get into some really philosophical questions about what the world would look like if everything was using the blockchain. But otherwise, maybe ground the conversation back into what this means for you and your business from my accounting lens.
Lovely. Thank you, Sam. So my first question for you, Mary, is this whole day is about change and embracing new technology and new ideas and everything like that. How do you get organisations and individuals that lead those to discard their kind of outdated thinking around, it's always been done this way? What are some of the tools and techniques that you help people, see around those corners?
It's a great question, and if I go back to my accounting days, always my managers all the way through my accounting career were like, Mary, leave it alone. It's not broken. Don't try to fix everything. And I was always about efficiencies and effectiveness. And sometimes we do need to break things to fix them. And sometimes it doesn't matter if things aren't broken. They can be made better. We want to look at things being made better. And mindset about change, people go, oh, I can't change. Do you change your clothes? Do you change your underwear? Do you plant a sapling and expect it not to grow? Change is everywhere. We have change all around us everywhere. And the minute that we bring something that's personal to the person who's adverse to change, we bring something personal, find something for them, ask them great questions. Court goes on about being curious, and I'm such a curious advocate as well. Ask great questions and find what they're passionate about, find what they like, find what they love, and wrap your change agent around that, because whatever that is for them, it changes, because everything is changes. The only thing constant is change. So we want to use adaptable tools. And I'm not quite as old as Neville here, but when I started my accounting career, we started in ledger books. We had a green accounts payable book and a green accounts receivable book, and we ruled them off at the end of the month, and we put them into a red general ledger book. And then when I was 17, computers started being the big buzz, so I went and worked for a computer company that did accounting by computers. I was just so excited about that. So I've always been a change advocate. I encourage everyone to get on board with change. I love AI. I think it's one of the greatest changes. So many people are fearful. My son wants to be integrated with an AI. I'm like, let's get it done. And he goes, no, let him iron out some bugs first. He's actually talking to Courtney about it. So yeah, change needs to happen. Our mindsets, we think we don't change, but everybody has a change mindset. Everyone in this room, everyone everywhere has a change mindset. We just think it's fixed in certain places. So we need to unwrap that and let them know that they can use that change mindset everywhere.
I think Sam might have seen those ledgers somewhere sort of in a time warp.
Museum.
Yeah, in a museum that's been dug out. Really? Ledgers? Thank you for that. Next question for you, Neville. You tell everybody that will listen, and that's lots of people, you're such a fantastic networker. You're 83, you want to live to be 102. But tell us a little bit more about... 103. Tell us a little bit more about, Steep Renaissance. You've been a shaman, you've had such an amazing and varied career, reinventing yourself all the time. So tell us the evolution of that, because you are an embodiment of someone that has changed constantly.
Yes, I was born with what I found later to be a gift, and that's called ADHD, but it was only when I was 35 that I found that I had it. I'd been working with it all my life, and where this gift took me was that I'm totally congenitally unable to concentrate on one thing at a time. I've always had 7 different streams, right from the youngest times, 7 different roles, 7 different businesses, 7 different beings in the world, and that's developed. So as I've grown older and studied more and delved into urban shamanism and into most of the psychologies that exist, I've come to understand that the greatest resource and the greatest enemy of all of us are our brains, our mindsets, our thinking, and I've realised that the biggest technology challenge is to have mindware, peopleware, and orgware to make these significant changes in our thinking, in the way we do things. The old business, you can't use the tools and techniques that created a problem to get us out of it. So Steep Renaissance was born as an integration, as I said, social, technological, ecological, economic and political. First of all, to change us and our mindsets, to change our teams, to change our businesses, and hopefully to do that to change our world. I've always seen that one of the greatest purposes of life is to become the very best versions of ourselves. That means that, we are stupid if we retire. Why do that when you can reinvent yourself and move on to new pastures? So, yeah, I'm 83, I'm not out yet. I have the intention of living till 103. As people know, then I want to have my last orgasm, so I'm coming as I'm going.
Thank you, Neville. For the visual people in the room, I'm sure you can, take that mental snapshot. Congratulations. My next question for you, Tim, as a philosopher here, share a little bit about the role of ethics in AI adoption. One of the things that people are worried about AI is and big tech in general, is that lack of, I suppose, accountability, and it feels like we've lost a connection with the social contract with big tech, being global, not paying their taxes, those kind of things. So, especially from an AI point of view, walk us through some of the ethics from a philosophical point of view.
Well, I think that would require its own keynote. So if anybody can come back to me about that.
It's Forge 2025.
Yeah. I mean, look, maybe this is the most critical question we could be asking, and there's no way to do that justice in a few minutes as part of a panel, and certainly it's nothing I can do justice to myself. I'll tell a bit of a story, not a story quite like Neville's, maybe one we'll see how we go. And the end point of that story will be to point towards a way of engaging what we could think about as conversation. We could speak about it as dialogic intelligence, and we'll unpack that a little bit, maybe over the course of the panel, maybe later. But I think in the context of forged, we have an interesting question to ask ourselves. Do we want to forge, or do we want to be forged? And be careful, right, that the tools we are building serve what we care about, rather than finding ourselves stuck serving the tools that we're building, right? We want to create or be created. There's a notion in philosophy, a man named Daniel Fraga comes from a man named Arturo Escobar, speak about ontological design. It basically just means the design of being. Essentially, what we build creates us in turn. Yeah? What we build creates us in turn. It's not the same notion that technology is values neutral, that any tool could be used for good or ill as if it's not connected to a living history of a value set that brought it into being. We're part of a dynamic world. We're part of creation. We are a moving influence. So there's much more to say about that, but I think we have this question facing us. And it asks of us, what do we care about, first of all? And the second thing I'll say, to which, remember, dialogic intelligence and the promise of learning to communicate with each other more effectively can hopefully be part of an address of, is the notion that we actually don't know all there is to know about AI. Of course, AI is a little bit like a black box. Take generative AI. Yes, we can put in prompts, and we're going to get an output, but the process that is doing the selection, it's not so clear. Now, again, we really need to double click on that. But AI is a bit like a black box. But so are we. We're also a bit like a black box. The very notion of the unconscious speaks to this. The reality is we're not always in touch with what we care about. We're not always in touch with what we're bringing into the world. So in the case of AI, we do have a situation a little bit, which is a black box inputting things into another black box. Right? Now, how do we relate with that? How do we relate with that kind of challenge? That encountering of question, the unknown. Well, in there can step dialogue and many other things too. Wisdom must be called on in response to this. And what is wisdom? Maybe we'll leave that for now and we'll pass it on.
Thank you, Tim. Wow. It's got the room thinking and going quiet. Very deep answer. Thank you very much. Sam, I'm going to move on to you. You're heavily involved in blockchain, and blockchain is, I'm going to say, is a bit of a bad rap. The ICOs and the get-rich-quick scheme. People, and they do it over history. 20 years ago it was .com. Now it was sort of blockchain. So there's been a lot of scammers and a lot of false dawns and a lack of kind of almost use case for some of blockchain. It's like a great idea, like a lot of startups, great idea struggling for a market fit. So I'd like you to tell us, where do you see the blockchain being most likely adapted? And because it can do amazing things, and I understand the concept of it and the value that it's going to bring, but most people have been struggling for a use case for it. So where do you see it can have the most impact and the largest sort of adoption?
So I guess it is worth differentiating crypto from blockchain. Crypto is the bad boy of the blockchain world. It doesn't have a good rap. So it's worth differentiating that blockchain's best application to date is cryptocurrency. That's its biggest use case so far. But blockchain is much more than that. There's a saying that blockchain and the industry where it was previously was a hammer looking for a nail. Companies and individuals wanting to find a use case for blockchain rather than implementing blockchain at a base layer or building on top of chains. So I guess in summary, the best use case is it makes transactions trustful. You can believe what's been written on a blockchain. It makes them quicker and it makes them cheaper. If you want to send money overseas, that's a lengthy process and it won't happen overnight. But on the blockchain, you can do that in an instant without paying any fees, maybe a tiny little bit of a gas fee. But the biggest use cases, I think, unfortunately, for blockchain is the best use case would be if everything is on the blockchain. If your invoices were tokenized and written on the blockchain, you could automatically pay those invoices. And then perhaps if you're in manufacturing, that would then mean that you can go further down the supply chain, automatically ordering and then automatically paying until the materials were pulled out of the earth. I think the best use case would be if everything's on chain, but otherwise it's cheaper and quicker.
Okay, thank you. I know that Walmart sort of implemented that in the US when all their suppliers changed. So top-down worked, whereas bottom-up has struggled because if you got one supplier using it and then not someone else, then it just becomes this fragmented thing that is slow to adopt. So, but thank you for clarifying that. Mary, this is about change and adapting and being comfortable with that. My next question for you is, what kind of practical steps can companies take to cultivate this adaptability and resilience? We've talked on a couple of panels already today about this idea of having to get used to change because it's inevitable, it's happening. What's some practical ways that organisations and individuals can start to sort of get a bit more comfortable with that?
Well, organisationally, I'll start with, because we can put teams in rooms like this and give them challenges that the best thing is to give them challenges that can't be solved and to watch them all. So put people in situations where they need to become adaptable, that they need to change the skills that they're using, they need to identify. And group work is fantastic because we all think differently. And I learnt, back in my corporate day, I thought I was one of those managers where I thought I was always right. And if there was a group work, I would have the answer already and the group would talk and I would still do my way. But I learnt very differently when I did my study in human behaviour, and I'm dyslexic. So dyslexics are off the chart problem solvers. So in group work, if anyone brought up a problem, I would be, as the problem fell, I would be trying to solve it. And I learnt that if I listened to everybody's opinion, then I could gather all the data. So data is a driver for lots of things. If I gathered all the data, then I could look at problem solving the whole problem instead of piecemeal that wasn't really the problem. So if we push people into situations where they're uncomfortable and we let them know that it's a safe space, ask your team to cross-pollinate, so to sit with other people and do other jobs, because that's a great way for somebody else to put eyes on your job and go, why do you do that? You're like, could you do it this way? And then you might be able to pick up some efficiencies and some effectiveness. A lot of people don't want to look at other people and don't want to look at change very well, but I think you need to hire people. Stephen Bartlett, The Diary of a CEO, his book and podcast, he talks about every company is a recruiter. And it's really important to take that role seriously and make sure that you get the best people possibly in your business, because that builds your culture. And if your people look after if you look after your people will look after your business. And you want to employ people, you want to ask some great questions in the recruitment process about change, adaptability. You want to ask them about a big problem that they had somewhere and how they solved it. And you'll be able to get key words out of that to figure out if they're going to be a cultural fit and if they're going to be adaptable and changeable. But the fastest way to make a non-changeable person lean into change is to put them into group work, let them know it's a safe space and put them under pressure.
Thank you. I've got a little hiring tip as well. One of the questions I ask all the candidates is, what have they learnt recently in the last 1 or 2 years? Something they've done that's self-motivated. Because if you've learnt nothing in the last 3 or 4 years, then what are the chances you are actually going to learn something off your own bat? So you want self-motivated, driven people. It's a great answer. Thank you, Mary. Conscious of time, so a couple more questions. Everyone thinks that Stoics is kind of new with Ryan Holiday. He's got bringing these books out, but it's 2,000 years old. It's an old philosophy. Neville, you've been across the gamut of just about every, I'll use the word self-help kind of tools. what kind of Stoic tools or what would you use for and advise people if they're probably not as resilient or as adaptive to change as they could be? What's in your toolbox?
Terrific question. I have a very different take on change as an entrepreneur and an innovator. It's like, to me, change and transformation is an absolutely natural, normal state. And what makes the difference is our mindset. You know, if we have a stable, static, fearful mindset, then we will tend to resist change. If we have a growth mindset, we tend to embrace change. And the Stoic principles, to me, come back to two fundamental things. The Greek tradition was really all about virtue and character as being the basis of life and satisfaction. The Romans added the idea of resilience, or what I'd call mindfulness. So the tools that I believe we need to work with at the moment are, first of all, techniques and tools to change our mindsets. Secondly, to move into one of the most wonderful, life-changing, transformational tools that exists, and that is gratitude. We know that in the first 5 minutes when we wake up and the last 5 minutes as we're going to bed, our mind moves into an alpha state, and that is the most creative state. So if the moment we wake up in the morning, we transfer to gratitude, we start thinking of all the things in life that are wonderful, that we love, that we enjoy, and we program our mind that resonates through the whole day and makes a big difference. And then the third tool, which certainly comes very strongly from the Stoic principles, is the notion of mindfulness. Our mind spends a lot of time roaming in the past, bringing up rotten memories, bringing up all sorts of voices that try to bring us down. Mindfulness, or it wanders into the futures and it gets very fearful about all the chaos and all of the stuff that's bad and that's going to happen. But mindfulness, a great Stoic principle, brings us back to the notion of living in the present. When we live in the present and we're grateful about it, it is wonderful how life changes.
Here's the good news. Mindfulness and gratitude are both free. They don't cost anything. Tim, what would you like to add on top of that?
I think Neville's spoken to that really well. I was recently in Greece, and I had the fortune to go to the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Now, there were a number of things inscribed on that temple. Only a few pillars remain now. And two of those most famous principles, the first, know thyself, and the second, a little less fun, nothing in excess. And I was reflecting that in many respects these are deeply Stoic. I don't know precisely the relationship between Stoicism and the history of the Temple of Apollo and the Oracle of Delphi that was there. But when we think about know thyself, the Platonic version of that is something like know thy soul, an inquiry into the nature of self in that way. But I have also read that another translation, a pre-Socratic relation to this know thyself, is actually know your limits and know your role. And I think a relationship with limitation is foundational to Stoicism and to philosophy. There's something about not getting lost in the fantasy and returning, as Neville's saying, to the present, relating in the here and now with what one can, to have gratitude for the opportunities one does have and to meet the world in that way. Yeah, and then nothing in excess. Of course, most of us might think about Stoicism and think about moderation and these sorts of things. It's a bit trickier, you know. I think there's room to both appreciate that and challenge that, perhaps. I finished the last sharing with a motion towards wisdom, and I was reflecting just here. There's a famous line, I forget who initially spoke it, but certainly John Vervaeke has mentioned this to me on the podcast we've recorded together over the years. One of them at least, that wisdom begins in wonder. Was this Socrates, Plato again, perhaps? Wisdom begins in wonder. Now, wonder, what is that? In part, that's a relationship with excess, with the greater than, with the beyond, and with that which one cannot immediately factor into a prior framing. And so how we approach that, which overwhelms us, how we meet difference, how we navigate that, therein, of course, lies a lot of challenge, but there also we find beauty. And so I would say that some kind of synthesis here is the manner by which we relate to that boundary, our own, that in others, how we navigate that, how we cultivate strength and skillfulness in supporting the creation of connection between each other that can navigate in relation to what we don't understand, that overwhelms us, that awe-inspiring and that awful. All of that would be wrapped up in part of the process which is necessary to cultivate wisdom, but there's much more to say, for sure.
Okay, thank you, Tim. We might leave it there. 15 years ago, they did a study on Israeli judges who were handing out parole sentences, yay or nay, and they found that their decision fatigue massively declined right up to lunch, and then they got fed, and then they were ready to go again. So our panel and you listeners, hopefully that impotence from the sugar rush at lunch allowed you to sit down and sit with this and be probably, I hope, sort of open to different ideas and some of the context we've had today. So can we thank all our panel for their wisdom, sharing that. Thank you so much. And again, a big part of today is connecting to our different ideas, different people, different technology, and all our panelists are around for the rest of the day. So if you've got any questions for them, please hit them up later. So we're just going to the next session starting soon. Is that right, at the back?
Yes,
Yep.
You've got time for some questions if you need to.
I have. Okay, excellent. All right, I'm pleased. So anyone got a question for the panelists? A hand up? Yes, Scott, we'll just get a microphone over to you. You're as far away as you can possibly be.
What I heard the first part. What was the second part?
Urban shamanism. Explain that to me.
What is it? Rural shamanism goes right back pre-industrial. It's all of the First Nation peoples around the world had shamanism, which was really a mixture of being an artist, being a polymath, being a healer, being a spiritual leader. So they were the number 2 person in the tribe, and they were the tribal makers. Urban shaman is about adding all of the psychological principles that we've learned over the years, the philosophical principles, and operating them to retrieve our souls and make them whole again in an urban environment.
Thank you. Anyone else got a question for our panelists? A lot to unpack. Simon's got one.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like in terms of this session title, like Stoic Principles for Exponential Change, like in some ways an interpretation of that might be almost like moderation in exponential change. Like I kind of wonder, like I feel like it's a really interesting kind of intersection. On one hand, we seem to be aiming for more and more of anything. And yet on the other hand, how do we put like meaningful boundaries around that from a human existence perspective? And it's kind of more of an open, I'm happy for anyone to answer this. But like, is there a spot that we can find that almost tempers our expectations of exponential change being either both like good, like infinitely good, or even possible?
Sam, would you, I'll get Sam to answer and then Mary. No, you don't want to? I also wanted your perspective. Okay.
Yeah, I want to hear Sam's as well. Sam and I were actually having a great talk about blockchain as we started, and the good and the bad. And we're having a sentence about, you know, everything's written on the blockchain. So if I left school early, then on the blockchain that would say that. And I said, you know, that could be detrimental to a career. But then as we were talking about it, I thought, well, smart entrepreneurs might think, no, that's a better person to hire than an educated person. But for for your question about change, for me, I lived in one world for 45 years where I was angry, ungrateful, and I believed that I was being dealt from the world all this stuff that I had to handle. And now I know I actually, with my mood and my attitude and my ungratefulness, I was creating the chaos in my world. And when I shifted and learned about gratefulness, mindfulness, meditation, everything changed. So back in that world, I was striving for more money, more success, greater outcomes, and I wasn't I had a great career with great pay, but I felt like I wasn't receiving any of it. Now I'm not even focused on that at all. I focus every day on being the best version of me, but I receive more than I received before. So when we get in touch with ourselves, we're one in nature. Everything is connected, whether you believe it or not. I've lived the change, so I'm very passionate about it. But everything is connected. So the good and the bad is the balance. But I think that when we change, we might think we want something, but as we change, we realise we really want something else.
Fantastic. Can we give a round of applause for our panellists? Oh, sorry, Sam, did you want to answer to that question?
I was just going to quickly add, I said before the best use of blockchain is when everything's on chain, but moderation is important. As you said, that it's not going to be the most ethical or logical thing to do to put everything onto chain or use these technologies as much as we can. So moderation is important.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, everybody. So